Welcome to the endorsement interview for the Cuyahoga County Executive's race for 2022 by the Editorial Board of cleveland.com and The Plain Dealer. Democratic candidate Chris Ronayne and Republican candidate Lee Weingart met with the board remotely for about 90 minutes on September 14th to answer questions and offer their vision for the county. Board members participating in the interview include Elizabeth Sullivan, our Director of Opinion Content, Layla Atassi, our editor of the Public Service and Advocacy Team, columnist Ted Diadin, community board members Mary Kay Doherty, Lisa Garvin, and Victor Ruiz, and me, Chris Quinn, editor of cleveland.com and The Plain Dealer, and host of our podcast, Today in Ohio, of which Layla and Lisa are panelists. Ted Diadin stewards this discussion, and the video begins as he seeks opening statements from each candidate.
Okay, I'll start with some introductory questions and then throw this open to my colleagues on the editorial board, who I know are burning with specific questions they want to ask. So let's begin by asking the two of you to give a brief introduction of your background and qualifications. I know you could go on and on with this question, but we've got a lot of ground to cover. And in the interest of time, would you please keep your answers to 2 or 3 minutes, just hitting the high points. So we'll start out with Mr. Weingart.
Well, hello, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the editorial board. My name is Lee Weingart, and I'm running for county executive. I was raised here in Cuyahoga County. I was born in Pennsylvania, but moved here when I was very young, 6 months old. So I spent my entire adult life in Cuyahoga County. I went to Cleveland Heights High School and DePaul University and George Washington Law School. I always kept coming back to Cleveland, though, because I have a fondness in my heart for this community and for this county. In 1995 to 1997, I served as county commissioner during some very difficult times. The county lost $114 million in an investment crisis called SAFE. In just 2 years, my colleagues and I turned that into a $40 million surplus without raising taxes on anybody in Cuyahoga County. I also, in 1995, put a syntax extension on the ballot to bring the Browns back to Cleveland. I campaigned for that syntax extension alone. No help from my Democratic colleagues. Did get an assist from the mayor of Cleveland. And as you know, the Browns are now back in Cleveland. I lost my reelection in 1996 narrowly, and from 2002 on, I've been running a firm called LNE Group that's named for my children, Lizzie, Ned, and Ethan. It is one of the largest federal and state government affairs firms in Ohio. Over the last 20 years, we've secured about $800 million for projects in Ohio, in the country, and in Europe. Last year, we secured $400,000 to help 8 Black-owned restaurants survive the pandemic. $600,000 for Karamu House, $500,000 for the YWCA, a lot of other important funding for local nonprofits that needed money during the pandemic. I'm running for county executive because after 25 years of being in the private sector, I see a yawning need for new leadership in Cuyahoga County. When I left in 1997, we were a growing county, population, and jobs. We've fallen now to number 2 county in the state, and we're losing population, losing jobs. My Cuyahoga 2030 vision will reverse that trend and get us growing again in Cuyahoga County.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ronayne, let's hear from you on your background and qualifications for this job.
Thank you, Ted, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with the editorial board. I am Chris Ronayne. You know me. I've been in this community working for the last 25 years, and I'm a 40-plus year resident of Cuyahoga County, raising my 2 kids with my wife, Natalie, here in the city of Cleveland. You know me because I led the Cleveland Waterfront Plan, where we engaged 5,000 residents about a vision to connect to the Great Lake Erie, and it's bearing great fruit right now. You know me because I was chairman of the Port Authority of Cleveland. When we brought the Cleveland Europe Express liner service, we brought Cleveland globally to the North Shores of Europe. You know me because we just finished a project that I've been chairing as a part of the Canalway Partners. I've been their chair of their board of a nonprofit that just completed the Towpath Trail, brought a 30-mile trail from the Cuyahoga Valley National Park to the last segment, which we just opened last week in the Flats. You know me because I was president of University Circle Inc. the last 16 years, working with 40 institutions of various size and scale in the education, medical, arts, and cultural market, where we built a community in the asset base of the circle. You know me because I worked with 10,000 kids from the CMSD every year, working on education and work opportunities. We worked with kids for youth apprentice programs in the summers, Future Connections, bringing kids to jobs in Cleveland and giving them career path opportunities. You know me for small business development, working with our Next Step program in University Circle to bring small businesses to the circle, and particularly businesses of color, to grow in place. You know me because we delivered 2,500 new and renovated housing units and truly built a community in University Circle. And you know me perhaps for the Wait Over Wednesday concerts that we brought forth with over 500,000 people showing up over the 16 years that I was there. We brought that concert into a community development strategy. I've been there. I've been there for Cleveland. I've been there for Cuyahoga County. I've been there on June 24th when we got news of the Supreme Court's decision on the Dobbs decision. I was there with my new reproductive protection plan. It was about travel reimbursement. It was about health insurance provisions. It was about making sure that we were going to support women. And I was glad to actually see that taken up at the county yesterday. I led that charge that led the city and the county to the same conclusion. I've been there when 2 hospitals, now a 3rd today, closed in our communities. I brought forth my Community Health Equity Fund, which we can talk more about, but I've been there to support our residents in healthcare access. I'll be there for African American contractors with my Rule of 30, bringing proportional benefits to our contractors that represent the 30% African American businesses and community and population in Cuyahoga County to bring that into parity. I'll be there for our immigrants with an Office of International Affairs and a First Gen program that I launched this week. I'll be there for our seniors with separate housing and transportation departments within the county that are going to help our seniors connect to their community. And I'll be there to fix county government, to slow down the spend on our jails, to bring forth an ombudsman's office, to bring caseworkers into our community. I'll be there with the regional land bank. And finally, I'll be there working with Mayor Justin Bibb. I'll match his $50 million housing fund, his Housing for All program with the County Housing Community Fund. I've been there for our people. I've always been there for our communities, and I'll always continue to be. And I'm Chris Ronayne, running for County Executive.
Okay, thank you for those introductions, you two. And I wanted to ask about the system of government. It's painfully clear that since 2009, when the voters of Cuyahoga County elected to scrap the old scandal-riven county commissioner form of leadership and replace it with a county executive and council, they have not gotten the kind of open, visionary government that they had hoped for. The last 8 years of leadership in particular have been a train wreck, to the point where many leaders around the county are wondering if we shouldn't toss the whole thing out and try again. So I'd like to ask the two of you, assuming you agree with that assessment, is the system flawed, or is it just that we have the wrong people in the executive office and on county council? And what's the fix? I'll start with Mr. Ronayne.
I was there in 2009 when this community envisioned a new county future. I was a part of the team that brought forth county reform. I think since 2010 and the office holders took their seats in January of 2011, we have not seen leadership at work at the county government. So yes, Ted, I think the first problem of this system is leadership. And I think that that's always the issue with whatever you structure in terms of organization. It's only as strong as the leadership that carries it forward. We need to be committed to what the charter says. We need to just not put that charter on the shelf. And frankly, I think there's aspects of the charter that day one in the next administration, in my administration, need to be reviewed and actually changed. I think there's a lot of cleanup work to do, but we haven't seen leadership leading this charter with intentionality as the people intended. I can go into more specifics if you would like, but I think we're pretty obvious in your day-to-day news. I think that we've failed our justice system. We've failed our children and family service system. We've failed our citizens in terms of being able to actually navigate our county. That's why I want to bring the ombudsman's office back. That's why I want to slow the jail discussion decisions that are being made before our eyes this week down, and why I want to see a first priority for our children that are the most vulnerable among them in the hallways of Jane Edna Hunter. We've got to fix that system. So this is truly about leadership, and it's about a collaborative working partnership with the community that brought forth reform. And I named the first 3 things that I think are the first 3 priorities in our community, day one.
But you didn't
Thanks a
answer.
lot.
Well, but answer the part where he asked, does the structure we have work, or would you change parts of it or all of it?
There is not evidence, in my opinion, yet that the structure is the problem. I think the problem is the lack of communicative leadership between our executive, our council, and our community. I just think that we have not seen solid management. I'm not yet going to say throw out this charter.
Okay. Mr. Weingart, same question. Is the if you agree with my train wreck analogy, is it the system that we have here, or is it the people and who have been in the executive office and on council who are not up to the job?
So I think it's probably a personnel problem, not a system problem. Best example in recent memory would be the county council's decision to take $66 million of ARPA funds and spend them $6 million in each county council district. You'll remember that I was the candidate who called this out as slush funds. In fact, I think I even notified someone on the board of the first project in the slush funds in University Heights. I have been campaigning against the slush fund spending, which I know violates the charter of Cuyahoga County, which says that individual members of county council may not direct funding. Evidence that was in the Plain Dealer Sunday about violation of sunshine laws makes my case for me. I sent a letter to the prosecutor asking him to restrain what I thought was illegal spending. My opponent was mum. In fact, it led the podcast to question who would run county government if he became county executive, the county council or the county executive. So the issue is leadership. I've already shown it. I put my neck on the line. I wrote a letter to the prosecutor asking the prosecutor to stop the spending. I didn't do it. I think that was the wrong opinion by the prosecutor. As county executive, I will not repeat that mistake. When we spend grant dollars, we'll do it in a transformative, transparent, open, objective way. No longer will we have slush funds. No longer will each member of the county council be able to give out money to their cronies and to projects in their home districts. We'll have a regulated, regular process. That's what leaders do. They set processes that work. I did it as a candidate, and I'll certainly do it as county executive.
So you believe that the system is sound? It's the people who are wrong, who are wrong for the job?
I think the old system worked fine with 3 county commissioners. I was a former county commissioner. We had a couple bad apples, a county commissioner, a county auditor. But before that, the system worked just fine. I would argue that county government is not susceptible to a legislative branch. A lot of what we do, most of what we do in county government, I know because I'm a former county commissioner, is administrative in nature. In fact, when I was county commissioner, we had 3,000 votes among my Democratic colleagues and myself. Of those 3,000 votes, all but 6 were 3-0. Of the 6 that were 2-1, 5 were Hagan and Weingart against Boyle, and 1 was Boyle and Hagan against Weingart. That tells you we have a nonpartisan government that's not particularly legislative. We need to run it better without any question, and I think I'll do that as county executive.
No, thank you very much. I'd like to ask the two of you a bit more personally about what spurred you to seek this office. It's such a thankless job with so many moving parts and political peril around every corner. So personally, I mean, why stick your head in that bear trap? What is it about the job that draws you? And I'll start with Mr. Ronayne.
Yeah, sure, Ted. I mean, one, getting back to this charter and what was envisioned, I was there from the beginning, believing that we could see a better future. But after watching for 12 years us fall into the malaise, I decided to run because I thought this does come down to leadership. You know, our economic struggles are still there. To hear hospitals say that they can't find workers and they're closing hospitals based on that shows a severe worker skill gap. I want to see that changed. I ran because I thought we were not paying attention to the issues that were really the big picture, evidenced by the Medical Mart funding that just went in yesterday as approved as a pathway by county council. You know, that's money that I'd like to see go into a housing fund to help our most vulnerable in the community. I ran because I thought the service delivery, was failing. when you hear from the Center for Community Solutions that there are 90,000 calls a month that go into DCFS, and the reason there's 90,000 calls is because half of them aren't returned, we've got a problem. I ran because I looked at a criminal justice system that was broken, and I thought we could do better. I look at a government that's dysfunctional and frankly, the laughingstock of county government within the state of Ohio and beyond. All of this led to the idea that we can make this place better, but it's got to start with reforming our government as was intended to be 12 years ago. So it basically comes down to seeing that we can do better and that we've been punching below our weight.
Thank you. Mr. Weingart, the same question. This is a big, rather thankless and perilous job. It's acknowledged that there are problems here, but what makes you want to take that on and as I said before, stick your head in the bear trap there?
So Ted, you could run for office for two reasons: to be someone or to do something. And I'm going to do something. In fact, a lot of things. I've been very specific in my agenda for Cuyahoga County, Cuyahoga 2030. I'm giving actual numbers and actual ways to get things done. So when I call for 10,000 homes initiative to help families who are currently in rental properties or in public housing move into homes that they own, we create stability and wealth for that family and safety for the community. When I talk about working to create 4,000 good paying jobs, $25 an hour with benefits, not all requiring college degrees, I'll work with our major institutions to bring those jobs and to form those jobs in Cuyahoga County. I talk about my $10 million urban entrepreneurship fund to help form and grow 250 new urban-based minority-owned businesses. I know the value, having worked in the private sector for 20 years, of starting a business, how you can create wealth for your family and wealth for the community. When I propose a revolutionary idea to centralize income tax collection under Cuyahoga County, eliminating double tax payments at the municipal level, making taxes simpler to collect, protecting our major cities from revenue loss caused by remote work, and making the county more competitive. These are direct ideas that I'm putting before the voters to consider. My idea to freeze property taxes on senior citizens. So I have a specific agenda with measurable results. That's why I'm running, not to be somebody, but to do something.
Thanks a lot. Chris Quinn, I know you have some questions you want to ask the candidates, so I'm going to toss the ball to you at this point here. Okay.
Yeah, it's my job to ask you. It's a very pointed question. Lee, I'm going to start with you, and it's a little bit involved, so give me a chance. In recent weeks, the past month, it has appeared that you are putting some false information in front of people. You've had push polls that say Chris Ronayne wants to increase taxes by a gigantic sum of money for his health plan, which is just not true. You could say that Chris Ronayne wants to have the hospitals pay payment in lieu of taxes, which they'll pass on to you through your insurance company, but that's in no way a tax. And yet you're putting that out there before people as you ask questions, and it's just not true. You came at us, as we discussed this morning, with information questioning Chris's financial management of University Circle Incorporated, but you really didn't do the homework. And you argued that he based the budget on the backs of the tickets that the motorists get, but it turns out that revenue doesn't go to University Circle, it goes to the Cleveland. You pointed out that he increased the debt of University Circle from 1 million to 5 million, but that was about the University Hospital's parking garage. An economic development nonprofit often takes revenue bond funded projects into its budget. So the debt's on the University Circle books, but the debt is paid by university hospitals. The Port Authority does this all the time. You weren't really aware of this, and you're putting this out there like it's fact and true, and it's not really. We finally did a story because you were telling so many people, I'm going to freeze taxes for seniors. And yet, as soon as we started to ask you questions about that, you clearly had not thought it through. You don't have the power to do that. You're trying to hint that you think you do, but you don't. As we've shown, this is an important period for this job. We need people who tell the taxpayers the truth. If you're going about getting the job with false information, saying you alone brought the Browns back and things like that, how are people supposed to have faith in what you say if you get elected?
That's a long question, Chris. Do I have 5 minutes to answer it?
Well, I'd like an answer. It's a
Okay,
lot of
I
false
will answer every
information.
one of the points that you raised. Let's talk about the so-called chef program. I don't think Chris has met with either the head of the University Hospitals or the Cleveland Clinic yet, even though he wants to impose this payment on both institutions. At least he hasn't met with the head of UH unless in the last 2 days. The head of UH views it as an increased operating cost. You want to call it a pilot, I call it a tax. What they'll have to do at UH and the clinic is pass that cost on to their customers, the patients. When you run a monopoly, which is what UH and the clinic have in Northern Ohio, they have a monopoly on healthcare services. If you increase the operating costs of a monopoly, the monopoly will pass on those costs to its customers, the patients. There's no question that by adding $40 million in costs to the system, you will increase the cost of healthcare in Cuyahoga County and, ironically, decrease accessibility, which was, I think, Mr. Ronayne's goal with his chef program. In terms of his management of UCI, I stand by everything that I said, Chris. The last 3 years, he's run operating deficits. In 2018, operating deficit. 2019, operating deficit. 2020 would have had an operating deficit, except he played with the books. Instead of paying his bills, he ran up the accounts payable account on his balance sheet. When 2020 began, the accounts payable account was $1.5 million. At the end of 2020, it was $5.1 million. Had he paid his bills in regular order, as they'd done in the prior years, he would have run a $4 million deficit on an $18 million budget. Now, the county has run operating deficits for the last 10 years under, last 8 years under Armin Budish. So if Mr. Ronayne can't manage a tiny little budget like UCI and post a profit, I've got a problem with it. The next question was what on property taxes. So I think I do have the authority as county executive to freeze property taxes, but I've been very clear. If I don't have that authority, I'm getting a bill drafted up in Columbus. In fact, I'll have a draft this week, which is actually better than what I had called for. I was calling for freezing property values on homes, which would effectively freeze taxes for certain homeowners, that being those who are 60 years old, making less than $50,000 a year, excluding Social Security and pension benefits. The bill being drafted right now by the Legislative Services Commission, which drafts bills in the General Assembly, as you know, actually freezes property taxes, period. Not property values, property taxes. Next year is an operating budget year. That's the year when you pass legislation in Columbus. I know because I've done it for the last 20 years running L&E Group. I've got a sponsor, Tom Patton. I've got a Republican General Assembly that I'm thinking is itching to try and find a way to reduce taxes for senior citizens who are voters in many respects. And then the last question is about the Cleveland Browns. I would point to your newspaper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer. In 1996, when you endorsed me for county commissioner, you made the point that I stuck my neck out when it was not popular and nowhere near assured that that extension would pass. My Democratic colleagues certainly didn't campaign for that, but Brent Larkin remembered that I did in 1996, as did Cleveland Magazine when they named me most interesting person of the year in 1995. They recognized that I put that ballot, that syntax extension on the ballot. I didn't try and force it through without a vote of the people. I did that the right way with a vote of the people. It passed with a 72% margin, the biggest margin of any county tax to that point in county history. That was evidence that Mike White and I used to go down to Atlanta and meet with the owners, and we did, to promote the idea of bringing football back to Cleveland. We knew the Browns were gone. We weren't going to get the Modell Browns back, but the evidence of that passage of that syntax extension, 72%, was what turned the tide with NFL owners to bring the Browns back to Cleveland. Certainly Cleveland wasn't a growing market. If you're going to put a new franchise anywhere in America, it wouldn't have been in Cleveland in 1995. But because we passed that extension, that's the reason that the Browns came back to Cleveland. So I stand by that claim as well.
Chris, before I ask you a pointed question, you get to respond to that.
Well, let me start with my conversation communications with Mayor Michael White last night and this morning. His response to what you just said, Lee, and this is a man who we saw on prime time in a Monday night football game in Pittsburgh talking about saving the Browns. This is a man who went to New York City to Paul Tagliabue's office with Fred Nance to save the Browns. This is a man who, what the facts actually are, is Art Modell decided on a Monday that he was moving the Browns. On Tuesday, the syntax went the way it did and was approved, and it obviously a vote that was nervous about the loss of the Browns. But 4 years, through the next 4 years, it was Michael White fighting to bring back the Cleveland Browns. And I quote, Michael White said to me this morning, I can also tell you without fear of contradiction, throughout the entire experience from beginning to end, I never saw or heard from Lee Weingart, and not one person told me that he was involved in the Browns' effort. Lee Weingart's assertion is a purposeful fabrication of the highest order. What was the rest of the question, Chris?
Well, it was about the University Circle fiscal management, the freezing of senior taxes, and determining your program to be a tax, a $40 million tax in his push bowl.
I think what we're seeing with Mr. Weingart is a pattern of pathological lying. I think that it's evidenced every week now on this campaign, and it's the worst in politics. It's the worst in what we're seeing in democracy. So to your point, there was the assertion by you, Mr. Weingart, that the University Circle Police Department collected revenues for the purpose of balancing budget, specifically your assertion from black motorists. First, I think that's race baiting, but it's patently false. The numbers, the revenues go entirely to the city of Cleveland. With respect to budgets, over a 3-year window, yes, we look at Longview and nonprofits because we make initiatives happen that don't just happen in a 365-day cycle. Evidence, the debt that you suggested that we took on, ironically, given your comments about university hospitals, were to help university hospitals monetize an asset in such a way that it could bring revenue streams that proved out to be very important during the pandemic. And oh, by the way, I will let you know, with my Community Health Equity Fund, I have been in touch with the main campus president. We are meeting, and I think there's a win-win opportunity out there in that program. There's $114 million in taxable property. What I've proposed is a 35% capture, which nets about $39 million a year. And when we see what we just saw this morning, the closure of St. Vincent's Hospital, it becomes all the more important. Not to mention, these are dollars that would otherwise go to our schools, our parks, our libraries. But we have 3 hospital closures in as many months. This community is hurting, and we need to find ways to revenue source new needs of our residents. And I think our biggest employers in our employment sector will eventually see that light and be with that program. And you know what? They're very valuable to us in this community from a patient care standpoint, from an income tax generation standpoint, from an economic development, and from access to healthcare, but we can do more.
All right. So my question for you, Chris, it's interesting that you just called what he was doing race baiting, because I don't agree it's race baiting. We don't feel you've ever adequately answered the question about how the UCI Police Department was pulling over the huge proportion of black drivers. One could argue that during the period of Cleveland's consent decree and everything that was going on, you, as the manager of an agency that has a police department, should have proactively checked with what your department was doing. But even that aside, when ProPublica did the study and found that 90% of the people being pulled over were black, we would have expected urgency in stopping that. Clearly, that is not okay. The number of people coming into University Circle every day for hospital for the university is not 95% black. Something's wrong. And a year later, it was actually worse, not better. You've said a lot of stuff, but you've never really adequately addressed why you didn't show urgency to immediately stop what was clearly racial profiling by your police department.
Respectfully, I would disagree, and I'll come back to the race baiting later. But on the issues of acting, ProPublica's article came out the day of the national debate here in Cleveland. The very first thing I did was call Mr. Armstrong, the reporter, and thanked him for writing it. The next call I made was to the NAACP and said, I'm going to be looking to work with you to remedy what is a cultural problem. The next call I made was to the chief of police to make sure that I could get the chief on board to address what I think is need for cultural change. And the next thing I did, all within the first morning of the article coming up, was call the consultant, the chief diversity officer at Cleveland State University, Dr. Ronayne, and said, I'm going to need immediate work with you. We went through immediately racial bias training. We initiated body cams. We brought forth a citizens review board. And I asked our foundation partners to help me lean in to our other area affiliate departments to make the necessary changes. And I will do that as your county leader. So leaders lead and we act exactly on the information we get. And that's what we did.
Lee, you get to respond to that before
Sure.
I turn it back over
The
to Ted.
timeline is very important here. In 2018, Chris Ronayne signed on behalf of UCI an agreement with the city of Cleveland that required him to appoint a citizen review committee for the UCI Police Department. 2018, no committee. 2019, no committee. 2020, no committee. He appointed the committee in 2021. We have evidence of an agenda for a single meeting on September 30th, 2021, his last day at UCI, but no minutes from that meeting. And the one African-American man on the committee was not invited to the meeting. So he failed miserably there. He did not do his job. A contractual agreement that he had with the city of Cleveland to form a citizen review committee that could have stopped some of this targeting by his police, but the committee didn't exist. So in October of 2020, Chris Ronayne said, it's horrifying. I think he said is whatever leaders lead stuff, and we're going to fix it. Well, 11 months later, he didn't fix it. It went from 90% of targeting Black drivers to 94%. So I think what he did, he made a big statement October of 2021 and then just let it be. Never looked at it again. And I know it's because when the article came out in May of this year, he said, I'm not surprised to hear that the number has gone up, as if he were some third-party dispassionate observer of the situation, not somebody who was intimately trying to solve the problem. He cites Ronayne. So Ronayne did a study of traffic tickets issued in all of Cleveland, not just in UCI. Period in question, 58% of tickets issued by Cleveland police went to African-American drivers. 58%. Now, Ronayne says, I think one of his excuses was systemic racism. Well, if the city of Cleveland is 58% and UCI is 94%, can we surmise that systemic racism is contained to the boundaries of UCI, where Chris Ronayne was the head of UCI? Not a bad conclusion, if you ask me. He leaned in and then he fell over. He didn't do the job he was supposed to do. Leaders lead, says Chris, but that leader didn't lead at all.
I'll go back to the issue of.
Hold on a sec. You don't get to reply.
Words target.
You don't get to reply.
Ted, I'm turning it back over to you.
Okay, all right. I think we ought to let Mr. Ronayne respond to that, and then if you have a response, we'll continue that conversation. Go ahead.
What I said was that the issue of race baiting, when he continues to use the word target, and he attributed it to me, this is something that we are working on as a society, that we are working on here in Cleveland, and that I will continue to work on. And we have made the reforms to make this happen. He continues to provide false information. The committee is currently chaired by an African-American female, and he continues to just continue to spew mistruths about all of this, but I don't need to go longer on it.
Okay. Mr. Weingart, your response?
What are the mistruths here? It went from 90% to 94%. You didn't have a citizen review committee in place until 2021, 3 years after you were obligated by contract to have that committee in place. I don't understand where the misstatements are. In the city of Cleveland, during the exact same period, 58% of tickets were issued to Black drivers. How is it that there were 94% in University Circle? Targeting is the word that I've used. It's the word that Plain Dealer is used. It's absolutely targeting of Black drivers by the UCI Police Department, over which you had control.
Okay. Well, we've heard from both of you a couple times, so I think that that's enough. Who else has anything? Betsy, do you have questions for the panel?
Yes, I'm sure, actually, we probably all do. I see that Lisa is ready to ask questions as well. My question has to do with how you would deal with things that are being locked in now by vote of county council that pertain to major issues that you will have to deal with, as county executive, the next county executive. So, for example, long-term consultant contracts regarding a new jail. The vote we just saw on locking in money for the Menmart to become part of the Huntington Convention Center. And that is going to be, I know that, these are some issues that both of you or one of you has spoken out on at various times, and the possibility, a very real possibility, that there will be a vote to acquire the so-called toxic site, the Transport Road, a site for a new jail. Moving ahead, we know from our endorsement interviews with judicial candidates how upset they are that jail planning is moving ahead in this way without actually consulting those who work at the Justice Center and listening to their voices. So I'm curious, should you be elected, how you would roll back if you oppose these decisions, address them as county executive. And Mr. Weingart, I'm going to give you the first floor.
Sure,
on
that'd be
that.
great. I've been very clear where I stand on all of these issues. Let's start with the consultant, Jeff Applebaum, who's been a consultant on every county project going back at least to the Medical Mart in 2007. He's been paid 2.4 or will be paid $2.4 million to have found a site, found a financing mechanism, and determined a jail size. He's done none of those things, yet the county has paid him $2 million and agreed to pay him $400,000 more. I will cancel the $400,000 contract with Jeff Applebaum. I'm very clear about that. Day one, contract canceled, period. There's nothing that's going on with the jail right now that we cannot reverse. If they make the terrible decision to buy that contaminated site, a site that is so contaminated that it exceeds the lower explosive limit for methane gas, which is a frightening concept to anybody who understands what it means, I will end that project immediately. There will not be a jail built on that site. If I have to sell the $26 million property at a loss, I will do it, because I'll be saving a lot of money down the road. If you build a jail on that site, which is contaminated, you will be inundated with lawsuits 40 years from now with people who have cancer, who are defendants in the jail, or COs working the jail. Look at Camp Lejeune in California. The federal government's going to spend billions of dollars paying out claims to soldiers who were stationed there and contracted various types of cancer. So I think it's worth losing some money now if we have to. I hope they don't buy that land. I've been very clear that they shouldn't. And I will reverse it. I will not let a jail be built on that property, period. As you know, I was first out of the gate opposing the expenditures at the Medical Mart. I've been very clear that I don't support them. This is another Jeff Applebaum project, and I oppose it. We need to figure out a different use for that facility. I don't think tying it, more tightly to the convention center makes a lot of sense. So I want to find someone else who's more creative than Jeff Applebaum to come into Cleveland and give us some good ideas of how we might reuse that space and get some value, salvage some value out of it for the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County.
What about the sales tax, the perpetual increase of the sales tax?
So I was the first one out of the gate in the primary to oppose an unvoted extension of the sales tax based on the work I did in 1995, extending the sin tax. I hope to God they don't do it before we get there. It's the last public mechanism function that we have left. We are maxed out on sales tax. We're maxed out on sin tax. No one's going to support a property tax or an income tax for any projects anywhere in the county. So we need to preserve that 0.25% for much more strategic projects than a $600 million jail and a $1 billion justice center. I will, if it's voted in, I will try and reverse it if I can. I don't know how you can reverse a voted in or an unvoted sales tax, but I will do everything in my power to reverse a decision to extend that sales tax without a vote of the people.
For the record, they announced yesterday the jail will now cost $700,000 based on nothing but their whim and their effort to make
Chris,
urgency.
it will be
getting
a
it done.
billion before it'll be $1 billion before it's done. 1 billion. That's the over under.
Thank you. Just one other question related to this before I go to Mr. Ronayne, and that is that there's only one contested county council race on the ballot. So essentially, you'll be looking at the same county council pretty much as county executive, and yet this council has not been, shall we say, responsive to the statements from either candidate here regarding their positions. As county executive, how would you handle that?
Is that for me or for Chris?
That is, I'm going to ask that of you, and then I'm going to give both all these points to him. Yeah.
As you know, Republican has not served in county executive office since I was county commissioner in the 1990s. When I win this race on November 8th, it'll be a mandate that nobody could possibly deny, even the 11 members of county council. 30 years since the Republican has been elected, 6 years since one has served. I will come in with a public mandate that will allow me to work with county council to reverse these terrible decisions that have been made with this administration and bring some sanity back to county government. Everything I've said that I want to do, I will do when I become county executive.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Chris Ronayne, that same bucket of questions for you.
Yeah.
These issues that are being decided or that could be decided, as Chris noted, the permanent extension of the 0.25% sales tax, one of the key ones for financing of a new Justice Center jail complex. And then if you could address that first, and then the issue with dealing with a county council that hasn't been responsive to the positions that the candidates have been taking.
Yeah, well, first of all, we have just over 100 days until the transition to the next county executive. And I would, as I've done and continue to do in your news source and everywhere else, implore county council and the county executive to halt what they're doing relative to the jail, medical mart, and give the next executive administration an opportunity to put fresh eyes on this. As far as early notifications, I'm proud to be the first person to early notify the public, and it was picked up by Caitlin Durbin immediately that weekend, of the toxicity of the site at Transport Road. I was aware of that in my job as a former planning director, and brought that forth to the public. So a bit of early whistleblower I was happy to be. I think that it's nice to know that Mr. Weingart has gotten his religion now on environmental matters. He turned down the Ohio Environmental Council's application for an endorsement. I'm proud to be endorsed by them. He has previous clients, a cracker plant in Southern Ohio, PTT Global, that is known to be a polluter. His lobbying interests have supported polluters. And hey, I'm glad you got your religion on that one, Lee, but we cannot put this on this site. And I need to do everything in our power to halt it from going there. It is right now an absolute waste of taxpayers' money and time of any elected official or anybody else paying attention to this. And we need to slow the whole thing down. I have said that repeatedly. We've got to make a 50 to 75 to 100-year decision and get it right. And this getting it right doesn't just mean a jail. It means an entire system of justice. We need to look through the prism of how can we downsize the prison population to which only 20% are violent offenders? How can we look at what I just toured, a diversion center that is empty, and fill it? How can we put more persons in beds and treatment beds, not jail cells? So that's my first premise is, yes, slow down the jail. As far as the county council, right, we're in a democracy where they're in and about to, in various cycles, get reelected and take their seats. I believe very strongly that we should together work on charter reform, that we should together say, let's get this right. I don't agree with the 66 million in ARPA that's distributed through a council effort. I do agree that we should tighten up this charter immediately. And day one, we need to initiate a new reform process of our charter. And as it relates to the sales tax, I agree that we've got a precious set of funds in this community, and that we have at 7 3/4 and with that extra 0.25% set to expire, we're in a very high tax environment here. We've got to figure out how to get this right. I've said it over and over again. It starts with halting the work with 100 days out and then slowing it down for a nice deliberative decision that we need to make as a community together. This is being rushed.
But would you reverse some of the decisions that have already been made if you can?
Absolutely.
So which ones would you reverse?
Particularly the site on the jail, I would immediately suspend the contracts of the consultants working on this project. And I would take this to a conversation with our constituents about what we're really doing. You know, and I don't feel that that's it. But I was the one candidate who was at the meeting about the jail. I sat there and I felt that the public engagement process was very flawed. After that meeting, I went right back down to the site. Somebody telling you that this is transit accessible is out to lunch. It's in a ditch. I talked to your reporter from the site that night after going to the public meeting. Everything's wrong about this process. It's been rushed. It's been closed loop. It's been behind closed doors, and we've got to fix it.
Okay, thanks.
Betsy, did you have something else or not?
Nope, that's
Okay.
it for me.
Lisa, you were looking to ask a question.
Yeah, and of course I got many, but I'm going to pick this one. Mr. Weingart, part of your campaign, plank is to create a county municipality, which is a big step towards regionalism, which has tried and failed in the past. Why do you think the time might be now for a more regional approach?
So the way that we centralize income tax collection under Cuyahoga County is to give the county certain municipal powers. They'd be exclusive powers in this case. It's Article 10, Section 3 of the Ohio Constitution. We have to pass, if it's going to be exclusive authority for the county, it needs to pass in both the city of Cleveland and in the suburbs as a whole, not each individual suburb, but overall in the suburbs. That would give Cuyahoga County the exclusive authority to levy, collect, and distribute an income tax. As of now, this is what I think we need to do in the county. And I'm doing this because of what I've heard in the campaign trail. People are tired of paying 2 or 3 or more local income taxes because they work or live in different cities. They understand at some level that there is less money in the system right now because of remote work for cities like Cleveland, Solon, Beechwood, Strongsville, large employment centers that did a great job building up their job base, but are being punished now because of remote work. And they understand at some level as well that we're not a competitive county anymore because of our high taxes and a dysfunctional government. So if we go to a unified single income tax, we make Cuyahoga County more competitive. We draw more employers, we draw more jobs. When you come to Cuyahoga County, you pay 1 tax and not 2. We also end this insidious practice of cities bidding against each other using income tax abatement to bring in new companies and new jobs. Brecksville says, I'll give you a 50% abatement. Independence says 75%. Seven Hills says 100%. So you bring in more jobs, which is wonderful, but no attendant payroll taxes. So in this case, Seven Hills has more responsibility, but no more revenue in the till to help pay for it. Under my system, if the county determines, in working with the mayors and other leaders in the county, that a project is so strategic, it's so important to Cuyahoga County, we want to offer some kind of an abatement. Well, that abatement is shared throughout the county, not in any single municipality, but the benefit is also shared. So we bring 1,000 jobs into the city of Cleveland. Not all those jobs are held by Cleveland residents. Maybe some are from Solon or from Parma or from Beechwood. So we share the burden and we share the benefit, and we make Cuyahoga County more competitive. So my vision right now is to extend municipal authority, exclusive authority to Cuyahoga County to levy an income tax that would be collected, distributed back to the municipalities. And I've been very clear, the county will keep none of the money itself. 100% of the money goes back to the municipalities. So I'm wringing out about $20 million of administrative costs from RETA, CCA, and tax departments in places like Lakewood and Parma and Brook Park. And all that money goes back into the hands of the cities. Now, if the federal government decides that Cuyahoga County is now a municipality because it has certain municipality authorities, and it makes us the 10th biggest city in the country, and we bring in more block grant dollars and more federal funds, well, all that money goes back to the cities as well. This is not a power grab by Cuyahoga County. This is not a money grab by Cuyahoga County. This is making Cuyahoga County a service provider to the municipalities and the citizens of this county.
But it's been a hard sell before. So like the second half of my question is, why do you think the time is right now?
So if the ballot question effectively is, do you wish to end RETA? That's not going to say that, I know. But if the effect of it is, and if the ads that we run are a yes vote ends RETA, I think it passes 90-10. I don't see any, well, I've talked to 1,000 people about this on the campaign trail. Only one opposes it, and he works at RETA. Everybody else that I've talked to loves the idea of getting rid of RETA, double income taxes, prepayments, makeup payments, penalties, waiting on hold for an hour to find out they got your check or not. It would pass in a heartbeat.
Mr. Ronayne, you have your own, ideas, talking about, hospital taxes and so forth. First of all, would you weigh in on regionalism and if you are for that and your ideas for it and how your revenue thing is better than Mr. Weingart's?
Well, yeah, I was happy to write a column in your news outlet, cleveland.com and Plain Dealer in 2012 that was reprinted. It was written before the county races, and it was reprinted after the county races. That was in 2010, actually, and it was about shared land, shared service, and shared tax. And I have lived as an executive in this community on all of these fronts, working with mayors to do deals that are joint economic development agreements. One notably is at Warrensville Center Road, where we were trying to keep office max, and two mayors decided not to pit themselves against one another, Mayor Judy Rawson and Mayor Jane Campbell, and we cut the tax agreement between two communities so we wouldn't be working against one another. And that stands, that tax agreement stands. But the issue that I think differentiates Mr. Weingart from me is approach, collaboration, and communication. He talks about executive authority. He's really talking about unilateral authority, which again, using a former mayor's words, is a fabrication. It's a manufactured, he cannot do this unilaterally. And so what I did recently is called the mayors. I started calling around the mayor of Parma, the mayor of Brattonall, who's working on the municipal tax committee for the Mayors and Managers Association, and they're upset. They're upset that they haven't been included in something they're already working on. When you get down to the facts, Cleveland borrows against its own tax collections. Euclid directs. Westlake, Mr. Weingart saying everybody wins, loses. They're at a 100% reimbursement credit. They're at a 1.5 rate now. He goes to 2.5. He just cost the taxpayers of Westlake another % of income tax. So it's not as simple as Mr. Weingart says. And I think this comes down to a framework of approach. Who's going to work with leadership in this community to get it right together? It's me.
Should we have it more? This is a good discussion, I think. I'd like to respond if you'd like me to.
Well, but I wanted to get back to the question too about, because he has his own plan and whether, He
had an article, I think, is what he said he had.
No. Wait, we'll get to the hospital plan, Lisa, but
okay.
let them debate this more.
Okay.
Go ahead, Lee.
So what Chris doesn't understand is that most people who live in Westlake don't work in Westlake. They work in Cleveland and other suburbs. That's the truth, Chris. Just look up the numbers.
The 100% reimbursement, Lee. It's the credit.
If they work in
credit.
Cleveland, they pay 2.5%, Chris. So if they get a credit in Westlake, they're still paying 2.5% to some government body. So what I'm suggesting is a 2.25% unified county income tax. That's a tax cut for people who live in Westlake and work in Cleveland. Do the numbers, Chris.
You're missing a whole lot.
Chris is calling
let's let everybody have a chance here,
so,
please.
I'll finish and Chris can have it. You know what? Chris can have the mayors. He can have the Democratic mayor of Parma and the Democratic mayor of Brattonall. I'll take
I'm sorry, he's a Republican.
I'll take the people who are paying the taxes. I'll take the ones who are burdened by double income taxes, confusing forms, and penalties. So if I'm picking teams, give me the taxpayers. Chris, you can have the mayors.
If I could
Point
just
of
ask
fact,
just
once
one,
again, it's a Republican mayor in Bracknell, but.
if I could just ask one clarifying question before you move on. Mr. Ronayne, you never really said whether you were for or against regionalism. You said your
Well-
mayors are already working together, but.
Right, but by example, I talked about regionalism. I'm 100% for regionalism. We can't survive as a region without working together. And many examples, but I talked about the idea of impacted cities. When you have a company that's moving from one to another, you negotiate a tax sharing. That should have happened with the university hospital's closure of Bedford and Richmond Heights. And when it went to Beechwood, the taxes should have been shared back in Bedford and Richmond Heights. Had we had a leader who was on the ball like I will be, we would have seen that happen. I'm saying I've already worked to make it happen in other places. When we talk about air service delivery, we have to have a regional conversation. If Mayor Bibb wants to take out Burke Lakefront Airport, County Executive Ronayne in the future needs to work with County Airport to say this is your reliever space, part of your reliever space, as well as Concourse D. So we have to work together. Transportation, we need to work together regionally. Waterfronts, you name it. You know, land bank, I said in my opener, that's a multi-county initiative. We're going to have to work with our multiple county commissioners in those cases and the mayors and township trustees to avail that kind of land. So we got a shot at an intel next time. We didn't have it because we weren't ready with sites. Jobs Ohio said that to me 3 weeks ago when I met with him. So yeah, I'm 100% about regionalism, but I also don't want to trample on localism. You have mayors who direct income tax for dedicated purposes in places like Euclid who were just trampled on in Lee's quest to get a big story out there and get a big idea out there. You didn't do your homework with the mayors. Localism also matters. You didn't. I talked to all of them. And you said I can have the mayors. I do have an endorsement of more than 2/3 of the county mayors because I work with them and I talk with them, Democrats and Republicans.
You've got the
Okay,
mayors.
thank you both for that spirited debate. I cede the floor.
That's a double-edged sword though, Chris, because one of the complaints people have about you is that you're likely to be business as usual, that you're tied to the Democratic Party machine, you're tied to the mayors, you served on all these boards and won't be independent and bold as a leader. So why do you think boasting the support of the mayors identifies you as the right kind of leader?
Because as you've reported, I broke through the machine. I was the unlikely horse outside of the inside rail. I broke through it, right? I did. I found a way working with citizens at every level, at their doors, at precinct level, to get a Democratic endorsement. And I'm a Democrat who now has a chance to actually make change because I am beholden to no one.
Yeah, you're right. The machine was working very hard against you. And then the Brad Sellers incident came up and it all collapsed.
I appreciate you remembering that.
Yeah. Mr. Weingart, do you have a response to that?
Well, of course he's an insider. I mean, he's been an insider for the last 20 years. He also, so he is friends with everybody, every economic nonprofit downtown, the GCP, the convention board, all those. If anybody thinks that he's going to upset the apple cart and go against the system, they're crazy. He wants to grow the system. As we discussed Monday night, he is now going to add 4 new departments to Cuyahoga County: transportation, housing, ombudsman, and this is from Monday night, international affairs. We could have a Secretary of State of Cuyahoga County in county government. So he is an insider. He wants to grow the government. He wants more government. He's opposed to my tax relief programs for workers and for seniors. I am for the people. I'm an outsider. I'm on none of these boards. I know them all. They're all nice people, but I'm not going to march to their tune. I'm not taking $10,000 from the consultant on the jail project and his law firm. And I wouldn't take $10,000 from that person. I'm an independent voice. Look, I am a Republican in a Democratic majority county. How much more independent could you be?
I want to say to that, if I may rebut on the
Sure.
issue of insider, the issue for me, first of all, I don't spend all my meeting time at the Union Club talking about how bad the opponent is. I spend my time in nonprofits, as Victor Ruiz can attest on this line, when I reach out to him. As I reached out to the food bank, as I reached out to Providence House, Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries, and in all cases, my reason was to learn what they do and to see if we could actually cite caseworkers at their facilities as frontline workers. It's intuitive. If you go into a nonprofit and you are food insecure at the food bank, you are probably housing insecure. So I'm doing right now the work to build the partnerships of the future. I have been on boards in this community, and a lot of them, I'm proud of helping deliver the towpath trail. Lee, last I saw, the most significant board you were on and chaired as the president of the board was the Shaker Heights Country Club. I've been on a lot of boards, and I'm proud of the boards I've been on, but I've been in the space working with nonprofits, touring the homeless shelter like I did 3 weeks ago, learning about if we can put job placement centers in the homeless shelter at 2100. I've been there. I've done the work. Lee, my biggest question for you is where you've been. You weren't there on women's issues after June 24th. You weren't there on permitless carry issues when the state of Ohio just basically made our communities more vulnerable in Cuyahoga County. You haven't been there, Lee. Where you been the last 20 years? The last 2 years, you put together some PPP loans, particularly, you talk about targeting specifically to make sure you could cover African-American businesses so that you could turn around and accuse me of not doing that. 2 years you spent, Lee, doing a few things, and you put Caramoo House on your literature. You violated potentially their own 501c3 status. Lee, you care about you. I care about the community.
May I respond?
Okay, let's allow Mr. Weingart to
Sure.
reply to that and then move to another question.
Let's be clear. Chris Ronayne is a member of the Union Club. So let's get that on the record. Secondly, I've visited far more places than Chris has. If you look at my Twitter account, his Twitter account, all you see is pictures of me interacting with voters, talking to people in conversation. On Chris's Twitter account, he takes a picture here, and he leaves. Classic case is the Father Initiative at League Park a couple months ago. I was there for 2 hours shaking hands, talking to voters, and I was really active. I left someone behind to see if Chris would show up, and he did show up at the very end. He took 2 pictures with Black people and he left. That's been his MO this entire campaign. Don't ask me, ask the Democrats who are very worried about his lackadaisical approach to this campaign. Chris, where have I been for the last 20 years? $100 million in Cuyahoga County. I secured $40 million to put wind turbines in Lake Erie. $4 million to put wind turbines at Case Western Reserve and at Sopko and Sons. $100 million for Caramoo House in 2009 to replace the roof and the boiler. $500,000 at Caramoo for an after-school program. My firm carried the legislation in Columbus to create the land bank that you were just talking about so nicely. We did that in a lame duck session in 2007. We pushed that through. That land bank has created green space and affordable housing throughout Cuyahoga County and has bred 56 more land banks. We've been engaged with the community at a different level than you have. Yes, you sat on some boards, and that's great. I've been bringing money back to the community, $100 million in Cuyahoga County alone.
You know, it's funny, Lee, you've also been representing medical debt collectors. You went out there on Front Street about the medical mart and forgot that you represented them too. You continue to be the hero of your own story, Lee. And I see this pattern. I see this fabrication. You know where I was the day of the League Park softball game? I was at the Richmond Heights School District, meeting principals, meeting teachers, meeting students, standing on their football field as they were getting school ready. That's where my afternoon was. And I was called by the councilwoman who said, you know, it'd be nice if you could drop by after my Richmond Heights event. And I did. So you know what? 2-1 that day, Lee. It was kind of, you know, if you ever bothered to stop and ask, you might find that we are actually in different places at the same time. Lee loves to tell everybody, didn't see Chris Ronayne at Wade Oval Wednesday tonight. Had Chris Ronayne not been there 16 years ago to start the evening concert program, you wouldn't have had a Wade Oval Wednesday to be at. And by the way, I noticed the first time you showed up was with your campaign literature. I've been there 16 years. Most of the nights you say I'm not there, I'm sitting with my friends in the crowd that I've made friends with in the neighborhoods around University Circle.
All right,
Drop by Chris.
Stop. We gotta
Drop
move
by
on.
Chris is a good
I
nickname.
think we're,
I think,
Yeah.
Ted, I think Lisa did have another question. She was going to
Okay.
ask about the payments in lieu of taxes, right, Lisa?
That's correct, because, you know, you can't compare your plan to the county municipality, but it's kind of close enough. So explain that, you know, payment in lieu of taxes and how that would work.
Well, first, I was glad that Chris Quinn referenced that Lee continues to call this a tax. It's not. Thank you for that clarification, Chris. As far as the Community Health Equity Fund, I am tracking what 200 different metros have done in the United States. As healthcare, as an industrial sector, as the sector itself is growing, especially in our region, it's also growing in footprint. And we are following actually the lead of, like I said, 200 other metros that have instilled through a partnership with universities, with hospitals. In this case, my proposal is our hospitals. And in our network here, as I said before, we see $114 million in otherwise taxable property that we are just asking for a 35% participation rate, which nets out $39 million a year. Again, right before this call, St. Vincent's came up with big news about its closure. It's downsizing to essentially a minute clinic and a few other offices, and I feel for them. But we have got to figure out, as I stood in the streets of Bedford, right outside the closed Bedford Medical Center, how we're going to get patients to and from. We're going to have to figure out how to backstep those communities that just lost $1 million in annual revenue from income tax losses in their communities of Bedford and Richmond Heights. And this is why I put together the Community Health Equity Fund. I think it's a win-win for our hospitals and our communities, and most importantly, our citizens and patients. And it's not that it's not without precedent. I'm tired of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County being the last to do the last thing. I want to be among the first to do the next thing. And again, it only makes sense. I got everybody talking to me about why this makes sense in our community when they look at it as a growth industry. But if you can't bring any revenues back to support the communities in terms of their public purposes, it's really a difficult dynamic to sustain.
I respond.
Mr. Weingart, your thoughts on
Sure.
Mr. Ronayne's
So
plan?
last year, when the discussion arose of extending the sales tax without a vote of the people, there was a discussion. Is it a tax increase or not? Someone in this campaign said, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck. That was Chris Ronayne on the sales tax extension. What he's doing is a tax. You can call it a pilot. You can call it a fee. It doesn't really matter what you call it. It's an involuntary extraction of money from UH and from the Cleveland Clinic. It is a tax. Now, in terms of collaboration, I don't know that Mr. Ronayne talked to the head of UH or the head of the clinic before rolling out his big idea for a big headline. In fact, he didn't. The two CEOs, he should have lined up to get their support so they would say, you know what, Chris, this is a great idea. We want to be supportive. He didn't even talk to him. Does he recognize that between the clinic and UH, they have $1.4 billion a year of uncompensated or charity care? Nope, that didn't make it into his press release. No, instead he wants to take $40 million, give it to some unspecified committee of healthcare experts like, I don't know, mayors, county council members, and others for some unspecified use. Is it for transportation? Is it for down payments? Is it for, no one knows. It's just a $40 million tax with no purpose defined.
Lee, there's a difference that continues to be the difference between us. You unilaterally offer without community input the way you want to do things, and I'm different. That board that I talked about, we need to see that board generate with the hospital leadership what can be. Let me tell you one example that is an unfortunate example of lagging progress in our community. There's an organization that was literally birthed by somebody that worked with me at UCI, Kristen Farmer, called Birthing Beautiful Communities. It was an army of doulas that she built to address the issues of infant mortality in this community. She made great progress. She's passed that on to Jasmine Long, who now runs the organization. But this nonprofit is simply trying to build a birthing center that moms can have longer stays in need, both pre-birth and after birth. So it's not one day in and out of a hospital. I fully support that. This is just a few blocks from the Cleveland Clinic. This is just one example of where dollars could go to help support our moms. I'm just using an example, but we need to have a community conversation about it first. Unlike how you rolled out your tax plan, where mayors are left thinking, what are we doing here? It's just a difference of approach.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Who else has anything? I have one question that might be short answer. Abortion. The issue of abortion is going to be a big deal coming up in November, and there's a issue that was just the county just okayed stimulus funds for out-of-state abortion travel, and I wondered for residents who can't get one in Ohio for legal reasons or whatever, and I wondered where you both stood on that. Chris, Ronayne, you go first.
Yeah, well, I was the one candidate who stepped out after June 24th decision with a plan, an aggressive plan to assure that Cuyahoga County residents who needed abortion care could get it. And I said 4 things. 1, at county itself, we will provide travel reimbursement. 2, our insurance plans will carry this provision. 3, we will make sure that other county residents have access. And 4, we will not aid and abet any investigation of any doctor, of any family, of any mother. And I was glad to actually see the county take note of that. And I was also glad to see Mayor Justin Bibb's administration take note of that. I think I moved the needle for both of those agencies just as a candidate, because leaders lead. As far as the use of funds, I am glad to see that there's attention now being paid to the issue and that those funds are going to go for these very services. Again, my opponent has been silent. He has said the only thing I've heard him say is that it's not the county purview. I completely agree. I completely disagree. Our full purview is the health and well-being of our residents, and that's why I put that plan together. As far as the ARPA dollars being used, that specific a source of funds, my worry about that is it's a one-time source of funds, and we need to create a sustainable use of funds. So I think this is a conversation, frankly, to have with community foundations and other healthcare providers as well. Back to the chef.
Do you think that the use of tax funds or tax money and ARPA funds is something that's supported by most of the people in the county?
Yes, but I will also say that I think there are other sources of funds that we could look at for more sustainable sources.
Yeah, Mr. Weingart, what's your opinion on that?
I'm opposed to the use of public funds for abortion, and I'm on good ground here. The federal government has banned the use of federal funds for abortions for at least 35 years. The Hyde Amendment, which has gotten bipartisan support in every budget passed by the federal government since it was introduced some 30 years ago. Chris spoke the truth a moment there. The county executive has nothing to do with abortion. The county cannot expand or contract abortion rights. That's how it is. If abortion is your motivating factor, and I respect people who have that as a motivating cause, you should seek state office or federal office where you can actually impact the issue. These little things on the side, trying to get insurance, doesn't change the law in Ohio. Maybe they can get access to an abortion within 6 weeks. That doesn't change at all. Using public dollars to send people out of state to get abortions, I think is illegal. Certainly, you can't use any federal funds, and ARPA is federal funds. So you're probably violating the Hyde Amendment in using those funds to facilitate abortions out of state. Now, the county can have a role in this new regime we have in Ohio. We're likely to have a lot more births in Ohio because of the restrictions on abortion. Our Health and Human Services Department will have to provide resources and support for women who are pregnant and have children. And I will stand by pregnant women to make sure they deliver healthy babies. For women who cannot keep their babies, we need to expand the number of foster care and adoptive parents. Last night, I met with a group of foster care parents who told me that DCFS is completely broken on foster care and adoption care, and I'll work to fix that doubly because we're going to have more children that'll be up for adoption and foster care. And then finally, we have child support enforcement for those mothers who wish to keep their children. I will fully fund and fully resource child support enforcement so they have the resources they need to raise their children. I don't believe caring for a child ends when that child is born. I believe in the child in the womb and the child in the world. And as county executive, I'll put resources behind my belief to make sure we have more healthy babies and a better outcome for children that are born in Cuyahoga County.
Ted, just
thank
a
you very much.
clarification, if I may,
Yeah.
just because he brought up something that, again, was inaccurate. You said that
Go
I
ahead,
said
real
that
quick.
the executive role isn't, that this isn't a role for the executive. It is. If you're the pro-choice candidate, first of all, it is if you believe that health and well-being of our residents is the foremost priority of Cuyahoga County. And finally, I do wonder where you would be, Lee, with people like Nancy Davis in Louisiana that was forced in a situation that seems to be Ohio's framework too, to have to carry to bury a woman who was carrying a child whose skull was not formed. You know, I mean, we do have a role in the health and well-being of our residents. And this is why I put out our plan. It just, again, it's a defining difference between us. This is not something to duck and abdicate to the state. This is right now real lives in our community in Cuyahoga County.
It's a cynical ploy for votes is what it is.
Okay,
Ted,
that's,
Ted,
all right.
I got
Go
another
ahead,
one.
Chris.
So the reason I asked the questions of each of you at the beginning had to do with detecting humility. I think anybody that's watched what's gone on with Armin Budish the last 8 years is he has none. He doesn't have the ability to admit error, and it has led to some very terrible leadership. And the questions I asked each of you were aimed at identifying areas where you've been wrong. You know, Lee, you can say it all you want, but the stuff you put out about Chris and his financial management, flat out wrong. Chris, you went from bad to worse with the police in University Circle. And I was looking to see if either of you would say, you know what, you're right, I screwed up, I'll learn my lesson, I'll do better next time. Neither of you did. So I'd like to hear from each of you about whether you have any capacity to admit mistakes, to show humility. And I'm speaking as somebody that regularly has to admit mistakes and apologize to them for the entire public. So I know how hard it is. You both didn't take the chance to do it. Lee, you
I'm happy to go first.
Yeah.
So I've run a company for 20 years. I started it myself in 2002. I've made a lot of decisions over the years that I regret, and I own up to decisions that I made that were not good ones. For example, I've opened offices in places like Denver and London and other places that didn't work out. And I acknowledged after trying my best to make that office work that it wasn't going to work. And I told my team that was my fault. I've always been clear in this campaign that good things that happen go to the team. And when there are mistakes, I own them up. We don't agree, Chris Quinn, on the analysis of the USI finances. I think I'm right on a lot of it. Maybe I was wrong on some of it. Maybe the debt that they issued is not their debt. It appears on the balance sheet as a liability, as an asset. His expenses have gone up to pay the interest, and he's got more revenue from parking. That looks to me like a liability to University Circle. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but it looks to me like a liability of University Circle.
Well, I appreciate that apology because it was an intentional liability we took on as a service to our institution. Again, you can call me, Lee. You have my number. You can call me for a fact check on that. I will say, Lee unfortunately has difficulty with the truth. On this very call today, on this very discussion, he brought up again his founding role in the land bank, which he had to take off his website because it just wasn't true. You know, I wish you'd talk with your contrition about your own employees, and it'll continue to come out. But I just was down the road from my office 2 days ago, affixing a sign that had gotten blown out in the front yard of a person who said, I used to work for LNE. I used to work for LNE, and she said that in the middle of the week, she was told she had 2 days, and when she tried to recoup dollars, you threatened to sue her. You've had Fair Labor Standards Board's actions taken against you that you had to settle on This is about people. It's about caring for people in Cuyahoga County. It's about rebuilding a culture at the county that will work the way it was intended to work. And finally, I just want to say on my contrition, I showed it in ProPublica. I told Mr. Armstrong that this hit us like a ton of bricks. This is family. I spent days for 16 years waking up wondering if there was going to be a shooting, if there was going to be an abuse of force. On the citation issue, it hit us like a ton of bricks. There's a lot behind it. License plate readers that are issued by the county that we should talk about in the future that are actually biased themselves because, I'm sorry, I'm happy to admit the issues of systemic racism. And I'm happy, Lee, to humbly say, I'm a part of that, as are you. As white men in this community, we are a part of longstanding systemic racism. It's about what we do about it. And it's about what I did with the police department. So Chris, I was contrite from day one to the reporter, and you can read my quote, it hit us like a ton of bricks.
I'd like to know the employees at the Fair Labor Standards Act practice charge, because it doesn't exist, Chris. That is an absolute abject lie.
We'll continue on that fact checking.
Please do.
And if we're wrong, we'll apologize.
Please do.
Okay. How are we doing, Betsy? We're probably
yeah,
very close to the end of the time here.
We're really right up against the
Okay.
the
Well,
1.5 hours with 5 minutes left in the meeting. So.
Okay. So we'll take a couple of minutes, and please just limit it to a minute or two at the end to wrap things up. Please tell us why the people should elect you as county executive and why you should win our endorsement. And Chris Ronayne, we will start with you.
Well, I appreciate the robust discussion today, and I appreciate your reporting on what's important at the county. I want to say what I said at the beginning, which is why I'm running. I'm running because I believe Cuyahoga County can do better. I ran to break through the malaise that we're seeing right now in Cuyahoga County. I was there on charter reform, and I don't believe we've ever executed on what was really aspired to. I see a community that still struggles in some of our sectors economically. We've got worker skill gaps that we need to address. I see an opportunity to be better stewards of our clean water and be the freshwater capital with a river that burned and is now a fishable river. I see, unfortunately, though, too many things going wrong at the county. Service delivery failing our children, calls not getting returned, criminal justice that's upside down, looking at a jail that will approximate $1 billion in a toxic dump. We need to fix this. It starts with fixing the dysfunction of government. Most importantly, it's about turning a culture around. And that's what I'll be a part of. That's what I've led in this community, and I've been there. I continue to say, I've been there in public life. We're ready for this job. You look around the landscape and there's hardly anything you can point to in this community from a public sector that I haven't been a part of, whether it's the Euclid Corridor, whether it's the waterfront plan, whether it's initiatives in the Valley, whether it's community plans in communities throughout Cuyahoga County when I work for the county. I've been there. That's why, Lee, mayors know me. I'm proud to have their support. I'm proud to have the support of Mayor Justin Bibb, who also used to intern at your firm, but he's supporting me. I'm going to work with him in the future. I'm going to work across this county. I'm going to work with you to get things done because that's why I'm running. We can do better. I've shown it in places like University Circle, and we will do better. Let's scale.
Thank you very much.
Mr.
Weingart, why should people vote for you for executive, and why should you win our endorsement?
I think there are 4 qualities people look for in a public official, maybe as the next county executive. And I'll suggest immodestly, Chris Quinn, and maybe imperfectly, that I think I have all 4. First, experience. I'm a former county commissioner. I ran the county very well when I was county commissioner. I've experienced in the private sector the last 20 years. And yes, I did carry the land bank legislation. Just ask Gus Frangos or Jim Rokakis. They'll tell you I did. There's no question about that. And I've worked with nonprofit organizations for the last 20 years, securing $100 million for their projects, putting wind power in Lake Erie and wind power on the land, and things that we've done for nonprofits to move them forward in the pandemic, but also well before. Secondly, vision. I have outlined a vision for Cuyahoga County with specific targets in new private home ownership, new job creation, and new companies. I'm putting my neck on the line. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. Third, a backbone. People want a strong county executive who won't bend over to the insiders. They want somebody who plays it fair, applies the rules across the board, open, transparent, responsible. That's why I opposed from the very get-go the slush fund spending by Cuyahoga County. That's why I was the leader on that issue. And then finally, honesty. When I was county commissioner, there wasn't a whiff of scandal in our government. Of course, later governments did have a scandal, and that's why we now have a new form of government as a county executive and a county council. I have an ambitious agenda. I have the experience to make it happen. I'm running for a single reason: to reestablish public faith in county government, to make Cuyahoga County a better place to live, work, raise your family, and retire.
Okay, well, thank you very much to the both of you. This has been a robust and very enlightening conversation, and I appreciate your efforts here and the ability to disagree collegially. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it. I don't think the City Club debate will be nearly as engaging. Just my thought.
We just had it. We just had it. Thank you, guys. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
it was
Thanks,
a
everybody. Have a
vigorous,
great day. Take
vigorous
care.
conversation. Thank you, guys.